Hi everyone, it's another horrible day outside. It's gale force winds and it's really rainy, so I'm inside and I'm about to start off some seed sowing. So last week in February, so the days are starting to increase in length from a light point of view outside. Still pretty chilly, but I've got my heated propagating bench on, so that will provide a nice warm base for getting some seeds to germinate. And then once they're germinated, the light levels will have continued to improve and we'll be able to put them out in the greenhouse where they'll be able to grow on into proper little seedling plants ready to get planted out later in the springtime. Last year I did a video on how I sow my seeds and the equipment that I use and took you through it step by step. You can have a look back at that if you'd like to find out some more information. But today I thought I'd share with you just a couple of extra tips that I have for seed sowing and what has really helped me. So just little ideas to help you out when you get started. So my first tip today is don't sow your seeds too early. It's really tempting after the Christmas holidays when it's horrible weather, it's dark outside, kids have gone back to school, we're back at work, and we want something cheerful to think about. We want to sow some seeds because we know we're going to get some nice cheerful flowers in the spring and summer. But what happens is if I plant my seeds in January, they end up getting really leggy. The light levels are just not there at that time of year, and I also get quite a bit of damping off. The temperature is not right, you're not ventilating the greenhouse and things so much to let air in because it's too windy to open the doors and too cold. So what you end up with is you get a lot of plants that just don't make it through because it's just not the right temperatures for them, and you get a lot of leggy seedlings that have just reached for the sky trying to find any light they can, and it's very difficult to get them back to being healthy, sturdy plants after that. So what I would recommend, and I try really hard every year to tell myself, is just to hold off a few extra weeks. Wait until the end of February, start of March, and then you can get sowing your seeds then. There's a big difference in the daylight levels between January and February. So back in January it'd be getting dark around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and now at the end of February it's getting dark about 5:30, so that's a big difference. And by sowing our seeds now in the last week in February, a couple of weeks down the line when they've actually germinated, it'll be lighter still and the days will be stretching even more, and that will be really good for our seedlings. So next tip is about temperature. So if you are sowing your seeds and getting enthusiastic end of February, that's great, and you want to sow them and you've done it outside in an unheated greenhouse, chances are, because we live in Scotland and the temperatures are really low still, that you're not going to get very much germination success. Most seeds need a little bit of bottom heat to get them going. Some need a bit of a period of cold stratification beforehand, so things like larkspur, they like to be put in the fridge for a couple of weeks beforehand, but we're going to talk about that in future videos when we look at individual types of flowers. Just make sure you're reading the back of the packet and seeing what they say. But the majority will need a little bit of heat at this time of year to get them going. Now I've got a heated propagating bench here, and this works really well for me. I've got a video that you can look up about how I made this heated propagating bench if you want something quite large to start your seeds off on. But lots of things work just as well as this. You can use a warm kitchen windowsill, that will be fine to start them off. You can use those smaller plug-in heated propagating sets that you can buy, they're great as well. And another thing that you can use that I get in trouble for a lot of the time is putting seed trays on the underfloor heating. If it's on already, you can use it for popping your seed trays on. So that is a good tip. Have some warmth to get your seeds going so that you get some good success rates. And what you need to do and remember is once your seeds have germinated, you need to make sure that you take them off the source of heat. Otherwise, they're just going to get really leggy and they're going to stretch and grow far too fast. You want them to develop good root systems, so you want to take them away from that heat source and grow them on in a cooler environment. So another thing that's really useful to do when you're sowing your seeds is to split them all up into a filing system so that you know what you want to sow at different times. There's so many different types of seeds. We've got hardy annuals, which we can sow just now, that are cool loving flowers. We've got our half hardy annuals that you need to sow a little bit later on, and then you've got your tender annuals that you can only sow and have ready to plant out after the frosts have finished. You've got biennials that you would sow in June that wouldn't flower that year, but would flower the following year. You've got perennials that'll come back year after year. So there's lots of different types of seeds, and it's easy to get into a muddle. So what I do is I split my seeds into the different months that I want to sow them in. So this here is what I want to sow in the next couple of weeks. So I've got hardy annuals in here. I have got some perennials as well that I want to start off. And I've got some sweet pea seeds as well. And then the other ones that are my things like my zinnias and my cosmos and some my sunflowers, things that need to be sowed later on, are in a different box. And then my biennials are in a different box again. So that just keeps everything in an order. Sometimes you can get nice filing systems as well. You can have boxes where you've got the different months of the year and you can just put your seed packets that you're going to sow at different times into the different sections. So having some kind of a system is a really good way to keep organised. So my next tip is that if you're buying large amounts of seeds, you sometimes get the seed packets through and they just say the name of the variety on them. They don't have any instructions on how to sow them. And when you're sowing so many different types of seeds, it's easy to forget what each different type requires for germination. So what I find quite useful is to either stick a white label on it if there isn't one there, or if there is room, write on it some of the seed sowing instructions. And that just saves you having to go and look them up every time you get your packet of seeds out. You maybe think, oh, I can't remember whether it needed covering or whether it was just surface sowing, and you can't remember what temperature it needs to be germinating at. So just having it written on the seed packet is really helpful. So this one here is Saponaria, and it's a pink variety, and it tells me that it will flower 3 to 4 months after I have sown the seeds, that it needs to germinate around 18 degrees, and then it needs to be covered with vermiculite to get it to germinate. Seed sowing is really exciting, but it's easy to get carried away. We can sow lots of seeds in our seed trays, and if you sowed one in a full-size seed tray like this and just sprinkled your seeds on the top of it, you would get lots and lots of seedlings germinating. It's fantastic if you're growing on a huge area and you can cope with that amount of seedlings to pot on and then plant out, but most of us don't need that many seedlings all at one time. So to help with that, I split them down into smaller half seed trays which fit neatly inside a full seed tray. But even that is a large area. If you've got lots of tiny seeds like snapdragon seeds, if you filled a half seed tray full of those seeds, you would get a huge amount germinating. And what I find is if you have germinated a lot of seeds and it's just far too many, you've filled your trays, they're just too many to cope with, you end up just losing lots because they become tangled up together and you can't pot them on quick enough because there's just too many of them and you just get a bit overwhelmed. So what I do is I even split it down even further. So if I've got large seeds, then I might use a whole half seed tray or even a large seed tray. So things like our Leah seeds, they're really quite big. Zinnia seeds, they're big. So I can spread them out easily, give them lots of space and use a half seed tray. But if I'm sowing smaller ones like snapdragons, then I might just make individual rows in my seed tray, and I might do a row of snapdragon seeds, and then I might do a row of corn cockles next to it and a row of nigella, and I'll make sure I label them so I can see which is which. And that just means that I've only sown a small amount. I'll get a small amount of plants and I can cope with those. I can pot those on and look after them properly. And then I can succession sow and do the same thing again a few weeks later. But it just means that I'm sowing seeds that are germinating into seedlings that I can then cope with and not get overwhelmed. So here we go, this is an example. These are white cornflowers that I have bought, and there's a huge amount in this packet here, hundreds and hundreds. And so if I sprinkled them all across my seed tray here, I would get far too many. And also, I don't want just white cornflowers, I want to have a few different kinds. So I can sow them in little rows, which I'll show you just now, label them up, and I'll just have a few of each colour then. So what I've got here is I've got 3 types of cornflowers, and I didn't want to have a whole seed tray of one type. So I have put one down here at this side, and I've labelled that, and then I've got another type here in the middle which I've labelled, and then I've got a third type at the end of this half seed tray. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cover each of the sections with some vermiculite, and I'm going to leave a little bit of the seed compost showing in between each row so that I can distinctly see which type is which. So what I've done is I've just taken my vermiculite here and I have covered over my cornflowers, and I've done it in strips, so I've only used the vermiculite on top of where the actual cornflower seeds are, and that's left a strip of soil bare in between each of the rows of seeds. And with the labels, that just means that it's very clear which variety is in which part of the seed tray, and they won't get muddled up. It just means that I've managed to sow 3 different varieties of cornflower in one half seed tray there, instead of sowing one whole seed tray full of one type, which is what I would have done in the past. And so I've got much smaller numbers that I can keep on top of and pot up once they germinate. And what I've also done is I've already watered these seed trays, so there's no requirement to water from overhead just now. What would happen is if I watered from overhead just now, once I'd finished sowing them, is that they could get washed around the seed tray, and then that would muddle them up and defeat the object of having these nice rows of different varieties. So before you start, you just need to put your seed tray full of your seed compost into the larger full-size seed trays full of water and let them soak up from the bottom, and then take it out and drain it once it has finished doing that. And that'll be all nice and moist, and you don't need to add any more water at this stage. So my next tip is about sowing the seeds. And when you open your seed packets, some seeds are nice and large and they're easy to just space out on your seed tray. But some seeds, like this Gypsophila Convent Garden, there are hundreds and hundreds of tiny seeds in a seed packet. And I just sprinkled my seeds from the seed packet onto my seed tray like this. There would be far too many seeds in the seed tray and far too many seedlings germinating. So what I'd recommend doing is just sprinkling a small number of seeds into your hand like this, and then you can just spread them out onto your seed tray one at a time. And space them out nice and evenly, and then you don't get too many in your seed tray. So that's a much more manageable number of seeds that I've popped in there. Probably got about 20 seeds into that small area on the tray, and that is just a nice amount to prick out and pot on once they've germinated, rather than hundreds of seedlings in the tray coming out at one time. So next to the Gypsophila, I am going to put some corncockle seeds, and these are nice large seeds, so they're really easy to spread out. And again, I've put them into the palm of my hand because that is an easy way to be able to control spreading the seeds out on your seed tray rather than pouring them from the packet. And I'll just get a few germinating, just the number of plants that I want. And I'm putting corncockle and Gypsophila in the same seed tray because they have the same requirements really. They germinate very quickly as well, so you won't be left with half a seed tray that's not germinated and half that has. They'll germinate roughly at the same time. So the last seeds that are going into this seed tray are Phacelia seeds. And the reason that I've chosen them to go beside the Gypsophila and the corncockles is because they are all quick to germinate, and that means that germination should happen at roughly the same time, and I will then be able to move that complete seed tray on. If I'd say put the corncockle seeds in this seed tray and I'd put some Astrantia seeds next to them, I would have my corncockles germinating within a week and ready to pot on, but then I would have some in a seed tray, the Astrantia, that would take weeks and weeks to germinate, and so that seed tray would just be sitting around half full waiting for the Astrantia. So by putting the Gypsophila, the corncockles and the Phacelia all in the same tray together, they should germinate at the same time, be pricked out and potted on, and then that seed tray will be emptied out ready to restart with the next succession of seeds. So exactly the same as with the cornflowers, I am going to cover these seeds with some vermiculite in a strip, just covering where I put the seeds. So that's the Phacelia ones getting covered just now, and it's just a thin layer so that they are all covered over. And then I'm going to put a layer over my corn cockle seeds. Again, leaving that strip of compost bare between the two different varieties so that I can clearly see where they are and I won't muddle them up. The more and more that you plant seeds over the years, the more you get to recognise what the different seedlings look like once they've germinated, which helps as well. So there we go. I'm just going to press down very lightly there to make sure they're all covered up. The last thing to do once you have got your vermiculite on your rows of seeds and you've labelled them all up is to put the humidity dome over the top to create a nice atmosphere for germination and to place that seed tray onto the heated propagating bench. And we'll check back in a week, 10 days and see how these seeds are getting on, whether they've germinated, and I'll hopefully be able to show you then what they all look like germinating in their separate rows and how easy it is to then prick them out and pop them on because you haven't planted too many seeds. I hope you enjoyed today's video and it gave you a few more tips on how to sow your seeds successfully. We're going to get these onto the heated propagating bench just now, and I'm going to cover them with their humidity domes, and then in a week's time we'll come back and we'll have a look and see what's germinated for us already and the next steps after that and what to do with your seeds then. If you're wanting to find out more about sowing flower seeds, then you can have a look at the video that I did last spring, and that takes you through everything step by step. It shows you all the equipment, how to sow your seeds, what to use, the whole process. So it's a great video to watch if you want some more information.